So up at the top there, that $39.7 million, then we multiply that by the tax-based growth factor, which is provided to us by New York State Division of Real Property Tax Services, which is 0.46. And then after that, we take our pilots, that's our payment in lieu of taxes for this current year. The receivable was a little over $310,000. We add that to the $39.9 million, which gives us $40.2 million. Then we subtract the capital tax levy for the current year. And I do have to say that's been adjusted since last year, and the difference is that now it includes the local share of our BOCES capital expenditures. This was something new they came out with the guidance for at the beginning of this year, and this is part of the guidance is to adjust last year's numbers. So it rolls into next year easier, so the comparison between the 2 years is closer. Then if we had just left it off and didn't make the adjustment, it would increase the tax levy more than necessary. Okay, then after subtracting that off, we come down to 39.4. And then we multiply that by the allowable levy growth factor, and that growth factor there is the 2% number. As you can see, it's not 2%. So in the calculation, it's 2% or the CPI, whichever is less. So it's going to be the CPI of 1.81%. After multiplying that, it brings us back up to over 40 million. And then the next step is to subtract the pilot's receivable for next year. And my estimate for next year is about almost 338,000. And I do want to mention that there's a pilot in there. There's 5 altogether in that, and one of them, this is the last year for that pilot, and that amount is 43,000 out of that 338. And that brings us to our total tax levy limit before exclusions of 39.8 million. Next. So here are the exclusions for the coming fiscal year. The only one we have this year is for the capital tax levy, which is our local share of our capital expenditures, $836,820. And the exclusions for the employee retirement system and the teacher's retirement system don't apply for this year. So that's why there's zeros there. Next, this is a breakdown of the capital tax levy for the upcoming fiscal year. So at the top, we have our debt service payments for 2021, and that's the principal and interest payments on our bonds. And then the next one is our capital outlay that we have planned for next year. So it's made up of 2 items. One is $100,000 for a project at Riccardi Elementary School to upgrade, relocate some interior doors on the cafeteria. And then $26,468 is the remaining amount that needs to be paid for the Cahill Gutter project that was done over this year. Next, and then we have the BOCES capital expenditures. You can see there, $154,000. So the outgoing money for the capital expenditures is $2.6 million. Below that, we have the incoming revenue to offset those. So we have state building aid of $1.8 million. And that was for previously financed projects, as well as the cash capital project outlays that have been done over the last 15 years. And then the state BOCES aid to offset those BOCES capital expenditures of $17,000. So the difference between the expense and the revenue there gives us the local share, which is $836,820. And then we take that and we add it to the tax levy limit before the exclusions, which brings us to our maximum allowable levy limit of $40,631,060. And the difference over the current year is an increase of $867,746 or 2.18%. So that's our property tax levy increase that only requires a simple majority vote. Next is our state aid projection. I just did these in total. So our total general fund aid that was budgeted for 1920 is 23,048,111. And for 2021, our estimate is 22.6 million. So we're showing a decrease there of just under 2%. And there has been no new foundation aid. And then previously, the governor had given us in his budget some community schools aid. That's no longer in the budgeted state aid projections. And we are expecting possible further reductions throughout the year. There's 3 look-back periods in which the governor was going to look back at the state finances to see where they were and let us know if there was going to be reductions to schools' state aid. And those periods of time are, the first one ended April 30th, the next period end date is June 30th, and then the final would be December 31st, which is halfway through our fiscal year. Next. So here are all the revenues all put together. So we have the state aid there, the 22.6 million. And next we have our maximum allowable property tax levy, the 40.6. And the board has decided to appropriate from the reserves 345,000. So in the 345,000, there's 2 reserves that money will be coming from. 15,000 of that is from the unemployment reserve, and 330,000 will be from the employees retirement system reserve. And then the appropriation of fund balance of 1.4 million. And then other sources of our revenue are 1.4 million as well. And those other sources include those pilot payments, the payment in lieu of taxes, interest income, interest and penalties on taxes, non-resident tuition, health and welfare services, BOCES refund, facilities rental, Medicaid, and a few other miscellaneous items. Next. So here I just made a little chart with where we get our money from this year over, or I should say the projected year over the current year. And the split remains about the same. So this year, about 61% is from the tax levy, 34% from state aid, 3% is from fund balance and reserves, and about 2% is miscellaneous revenue. Next. So our total school budget for 2021 is $66,471,574, an increase over the current year of 1.1 million or 1.8%, which is just under the CPI. And increases, overall increases throughout this budget, or health insurance increase, and there's teachers retirement system increase. There's some BOCES increase in cost, and let's see. That's it. Next. So we're required to report the budget in 3 components. There's the administrative component, program, and capital. As you can see, the program makes up the biggest percentage, 81% of the budget, whereas administrative is 10% and the capital is about 9%. Next. So the first part in our 3-part budget is the administrative component, and this provides for general support and management, including district office, business office, personnel, public information, and insurances. And also the cost of administration and supervision of all the schools is included within this component. So as you can see, I just want to point out a few things that have changed over the current year. So within the business personnel, legal and public information, we shifted some money from the supervision of schools. We previously had a deputy superintendent, and now we have a director of HR, so it belongs in a different category. Also, safety and security, it really isn't that much of an increase. It's just a new budget code that came out from the comptroller's office, which places it within this component, and previously it was within the program component. Central services, we restructured our clerical position and moved it to central registrar, which is again a shift from the program component. And then the special items include BOCES administrative and capital costs, as well as insurance for the district. Next. The next component is the program component. And this funds the instruction and educational services for all students, and it also includes the transportation. So the big ones on this, the legal services, again, that wasn't an increase necessarily, it was a shift, and we moved a portion of the legal from the administrative into the program because a part of our legal services applies to the instructional items. Next, we have teaching, which this is contractual obligations as well as out-of-district placements costs for our students increase each year. And within that state budget, it changed our percentage that we pay for our residential students. We pay a percentage to Ulster County for our residential students. Right now, we have 4 of them. But our percentage went from 38.4% to 56.8%. And that actually started at the beginning of April of this year. So some of those increases are within this current year's budget, but I've estimated the increases for next year's budget. So that was the place where it went up. Next, instructional media. So within that is computer equipment replacement and network infrastructure upgrades. Pupil services, again, this wasn't necessarily a huge decrease. It was shifting some of the costs to other budget codes that were more appropriate. So it shifted them to the administrative component for some administrator. And then it also, that's where the clerical position for the central registrar came out of this line item and moved to the administrative component. So transportation, there's a reduction in fuel costs. As you all know, it's pretty cheap right now. And we changed a few budget codes and budgeted some of the lines closer to actual. But again, this is one of those categories that could change a lot with just a few students that need to go to special schools. So that one we keep an eye on all the time. Next is a new one, the transfer to the school lunch fund. The school lunch fund is operating in the red, pretty much. There have been for the past few years expensive mandates and participation is down. We are hoping that with the new wave lunch schedule at the junior senior high that we will increase some participation for that. And the last component is our capital component, and this pays for maintaining all indoor and outdoor facilities, including electricity, heat repairs, and it includes the principal and interest payments on our bonds. And the transfer to the capital fund for the capital outlay project is also included within this. So the decrease in the maintenance of plant, pretty much I looked at some trend data to see, where we have come in as far as actual expenditures over the past 3 years. So I was able to still be conservative, but estimate a little bit lower. But again, if something happens, one thing could be $10,000. So we keep an eye on that one also. And then our transfer to capital, I explained the 2 pieces that make that up. Next, this is just a different way to look at a variety of the budget categories. So again, the technology is that equipment replacement and network infrastructure upgrades. And then the transfer to the other funds is the addition of the school lunch fund transfer of $100,000 and the change in the total of the Cahill Gutter project of the additional $26,468. So this is our BOCES budget increase over the current year. And there's increases in this for central administrative costs and hardware and software. And that's where the computer replacement, there's about $175,000 that we're going to purchase computer replacements through BOCES. So it's included in this increase of $332,000. And there's also a few additional programs for our students that are now available through BOCES, which also makes up a portion of the increase. Thanks. So altogether, so our total budget is this, again, $66,471,574. And that is a 2.18% increase in the property tax levy, but the 1.8% increase in total expenditures. And this budget includes capital project appropriations, which is to finish the work at Cahill and upgrade and relocate the cafeteria doors at Riccardi Elementary. It also includes a night school for credit recovery to help more kids graduate. Then we have added a strength and conditioning coach, which will be all year long for the 7 through 12 students. We believe it will be better for the students to help them prevent injuries. We also included a modified lacrosse program, or modified lacrosse to build on the program that has a lot of interest. And then adding the transfer to the school lunch fund. I do have to say it's our one comment that we have on our external audit, that the school lunch is in a deficit position. And I'd like to get rid of that comment so it can be perfect. Next, we have equipment replacement, again, computer equipment. And also within this budget, we were able to convert 3 positions to new positions, and we were able to do so with some savings through attrition of old positions. So we have the assistant principal at the junior high becoming the junior high principal. We had the deputy superintendent resign, and we were able to make it into a director for human resources, of which we do have over 450 employees. So. And then also the central registrar, which we moved to typist from another department, so that we have one point of contact for, you know, all of our families district-wide. So it provides some consistency for families. Next. So, and this is our district reserves and estimated fund balance. So I have the June 30th, 2019 actual balances of the reserves, and then I have my estimated June 30th, 2020 amounts up there. And you can see that the assigned appropriated is going to be that $1,440,303. And normally, I'd say best practice would be for assigned appropriated fund balance should only be equal to the amount of capital expenditures or fixed assets and should be spent on one-time expenditures within your budget. Otherwise, it's just deficit spending when you're appropriating fund balance to pay for recurring items. So it's like using money from your savings account. You should just generally use it to buy things that are going to last a while, and you shouldn't be borrowing from your savings account to pay your electric bill or things like that. Next. So this, I estimated the property tax impact. And again, I just want to say this is a huge estimate. I used the tentative assessed values provided by the Ulster County Real Property Tax Services Department. So I just did an example of a home with a $100,000 assessment. So it was easy to do the math for yourself at home. And I want to say that all 3 of the towns located within the district are have different equalization rates. So that's why I put the different figures up here, because if you live in a different town than your friend, you're not going to have the same tax bill necessarily. So up there you can see Saugerties at $20.01 per thousand of assessed value, which would give that $100,000 assessed home a bill of $2,001 for the year. And then I just broke it down. So your annual tax increase over the current year would be $26.46. And then I took that and divided it out by month. So you can see that the increase should be around, again, estimate $2.21 a month. And I've included the basic star exemptions for each of the towns. And then I did an example of a tax bill for that $100,000 assessed home after your star exemption would be $1,409. And I also would like to add that not everybody is entitled to the STAR exemption anymore. There's a lot of people that have moved to the STAR credit, so those amounts are different. The exemption amounts are not the same as the STAR credit amounts. And then, let's see, so the increases overall, I'm estimating for the town of Saugerties is a 1.34% increase in tax bill, 3.35% for the town of Ulster, and 3.27% for the town of Woodstock. But again, that could change because the actual assessed values come out in July. Okay, next. I actually kind of had fun doing this part. So I did a look back of previous year's budget amounts in the increase over years, and then the tax levy and the increase of the tax levy. And then I also included a column for the appropriated fund balance and reserves for those particular years, the ones that were budgeted. And I just would like to say that when the taxpayers are voting, they're voting on the budgeted amount. So that's the amount in the first column. They're not voting on the actual tax levy amount. A couple points I wanted to make are in 2011-12 is the previous lowest budget increase, and that was when we had the gap elimination adjustment from the state, and that was the state's way of eliminating their budget gap was to reduce our state aid. So I could see why. I'm sure that's probably why the budget increase was so low that year. Then I looked at the average tax levy increase over all those years, and it was less than 2%, the average. And I'd also like to point out that in 2011-12, there was no money appropriated from fund balance and reserve, and now we are appropriating almost 1.8 million to cover the budget gap. Yep, it's a little history. Next. And this is our long-range financial projections. So I have the actuals for 2018-19, and then for 2020-20, I have the estimated as to hopefully where we're going to end up this fiscal year. And then 2021 is the budget, and then projections going forward based off that 2021 budget. Based off the budget and any actual information that is known at the time. And then I have the total revenues across, and then the total expenditures, and then the next line down is our surplus or deficit with those years. So you can see the budget gap for the next fiscal year, that $1.785 million. And going forward, that deficit projection increases year over year.
Jane, can I just ask a question with regard to the surplus or the deficit? Is that including a capital project, or is that where we're at right now?
That's where we're at right now.
So if we have a capital project that comes into play, that number goes down dramatically, correct?
Not necessarily. So with a capital project, that hits on both sides of the equation. That's part of your expenditures, but it's also part of your revenue.
But it's not taken into, I think after 2021, and again, maybe it's 2022, I'm not sure, but we're losing close to $2 million in aid if we don't have another capital project that comes into play.
Right.
So go ahead.
Yes. I believe that's in 2024.
Okay. I thought it was sooner than that.
But in that year, you also don't have the expenditure that offsets it. So right now in this projection, it's not showing an expenditure, but it's not showing a revenue. So it's basically taking that out of the equation.
Okay.
So not even considering that. But if you considered it, it's going to change it on both sides. So you always have to look at both sides of it.
Okay, so it's not going to be, we're not going to see a significant increase either way. It's going to kind of be, it could be a wash, or you might see a little bit change one way or the other, but not not a full,
It's not going to change it significantly. But one
Okay.
thing we hope to do with the capital project and our energy performance contract is to, do some of that maintenance that, hasn't been done in a while. So, and make the buildings, obviously, energy performance contract, that's supposed to save us money. So that will save us money out of our regular expenditures. You know what I mean? So it will pay for itself, plus we'll get money, we'll be money ahead. There'll be cost
Right,
savings there.
right, okay.
So, and with the capital project, the money you spend on the maintenance, we're getting approximately 66% back on whatever
Right.
we spend. So 66 cents for every dollar versus now whatever we spend on maintenance is just what we spend. We don't
Right.
get aid on that unless it's in a project.
Gotcha. Okay,
That's the
thank
benefit
you.
of those two. Yep.
Jane, can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
That 66% that we get back in state aid, how is that formulated or changes from one either going up or down? Is it some kind of matrix that the state uses for that?
Yes, they have a formula and they haven't changed it in a little while, but they do change it on occasion. It's one of those where it's like, 80 lines long of a calculation. I don't have it memorized. Does that answer your question? Okay. The next thing I just wanted to point out that the budget vote and board elections are by absentee ballots, and the absentee ballot is due by 5 p.m. on June 9th. The absentee ballots will be out in the mail later this week. The budget newsletter is currently at the print shop and will be out very soon. And the budget statement, the required document, is available on our website. Next. And then again, for public comment, we'll take your email or your phone message.
Kind of neat.
Public comments time? So we do have one public comment so far. This is from Gay Holstein. I'm a second grade generation weekender in Saugerties. Because it is my second home, my children did not attend the Saugerties schools. Although we pay real estate and school taxes, until recently, I've been happy to pay those taxes because I felt I was contributing to a community that I love, as did my parents, and as do my adult children. However, in my opinion, the school taxes are now far too high. We propose to increase the school taxes by about 2% to educate a student body that has decreased by over 5%. While you may see this as a short-term solution to address ballooning costs, such high taxes will make Saugerties unattractive as a real estate choice. This will quickly drive down property values as people look for communities with more affordable taxes. If you want to retain good schools, I strongly encourage you to cut costs rather than taxing property owners more and more, particularly with the current unemployment rate and the near zero inflation rate. There is just no valid justification for increasing the school taxes at this time.
Did you get any phone messages?
Not yet, it will show on through email.
Are we responding to this question, or is this a statement? What was this brought to us?
I believe it was a statement. Yes.
I have a couple questions myself. Just going back to the state of where we're at now and going forward, what type of contingency do we have for some of these costs that we don't get services for? And again, we go back to the BOCES, we go back to transportation. We have a $66 million budget that we're proposing right now. 50 something of that has to deal with teachers, benefits, transportation, and BOCES. I appreciate and I'm all for what all of these groups do. But in my opinion, there should be a paid for services. And, if we have certain things that we have to take care of on a certain side, but if we're not getting transportation and if we're not getting BOCES services where our kids are at their facilities, we shouldn't be paying them $5 million and $6 million. That's just my opinion. I don't know what and obviously nobody's got a crystal ball here, but what out do we have going forward to not have to, take on that debt if it's not being provided to us?
You mean, next year in 2021?
2021. I mean, we could talk about right now too, but I'm talking about obviously next year is the big piece that we're talking about today. If we don't have buses running back and forth to school, are we still on the hook for $6 or $5 million? If we don't have kids going to BOCES, are we still on the hook for $6 million? Obviously BOCES provides more than just, them going there. They have a lot of other things that they do, inter-office and stuff like that. And I understand that piece, but, we're talking $11 million of possible service that we might not have or need or not, we might not need, right?
Right, so these estimates are based on going back to the way we used to operate.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's just estimates and things change all the time. So it will probably change. I don't know.
I just want to make sure we're not locked into anything. Again, I understand we have to sign contracts at business meetings and all this other stuff, but I just want to think that I want to make sure we're doing some forward thinking here, and I'm sure that you all are. But it's just something that I think about a lot as well, where we're talking about, what the future is going to bring. And in my personal opinion, I don't know who's going to be in school in September. The way that things have gone and the way that things are going, I hope everybody's back and when we're doing the normal. But if not, I don't want us to see us, strap us and our community for people who, again, are either furloughed, got a pay cut, lost their job, whatever it is. And then we're going to say, and I know that we're not doing this, but I want to make sure that there's there's a contingency there that we're not on a hook for something that we're not getting, right? A service that's not being provided to us. And there's other things around that I know that we have to be able to do, but I want to make sure that, we're not on the hook for $11 million when we're getting $2 million in service. If that makes sense.
It does make sense.
Well, wouldn't it, like if budgets go to a contingency or an austerity, that has to be factored in as well, right? So if there is an issue, as he's saying, how have districts in the past? I would think that the answer would be that we're not on the hook for that. And I think, as it was explained to me, and again, this is just my understanding of it, Mr. Ferraro, we're on the hook for the administrative costs. But if we don't have the numbers for the enrollment, then if they don't attend, we don't pay for them to attend. We're not locked into that. We're locked into the administrative costs, if that helps.
Yeah, and again, I think I don't feel that we get off scot-free, and I know there's other services that both transportation and the BOCES provides to us. I just want to make sure that it's not an all or nothing contract or whatever it is that we're dealing with these numbers. So, I don't. It's crazy times right now, and I just want to make sure we're thinking about that stuff. Taking that into consideration. And obviously I know that you guys all are there at the table. It's just something that is on my mind. So I want to make sure I get it out there.
We do have another public comment. There'll be a recording that will play in it now.
Yes, my name is Richard Salzano. I live up in Berkeley Heights. And the question I would have is, going forward, are we looking at reducing transportation costs? Because I see big buses going around with very few pupils on the bus. And I know bus companies can't downsize their buses right away, but we ought to have some plan to reduce the cost of running big buses versus the efficiency of the smaller buses. Thank you.
I mean, the size of the buses is what the contractor provides. We negotiate our contracts with the bus companies, but we don't have control over what vehicles they choose to send out there.
And we have to have a seat for every child who's on that route. We have that seat, you choose not to pay.
But we try to look for the most efficient contracts we can find. Do you have any emails, Dan?
No more, just the.
I think Elena and Katie have questions.
Yeah, I don't have a question, but I think Elena does, though the bus conversation, I mean, I don't know that we've ever sort of, we've asked the question about having our own buses and our own fleet. I mean, we're not in a position, I think, to make that transition, but I think that that's something to sort of look at as we move along, and maybe it's not cheaper. But anyway, but Elena did have a question, and I just wanted to make sure, but she was having some trouble with her audio, so. Are you there, Elena?
This is Sue. She sent it through text. She said the budget numbers may not be affected by a capital project, but taxes will be affected. We're trying to prevent the drop off of the local share by 2024, correct?
Correct.
I just have a quick question about the budget vote coming up. It's my understanding this budget vote is costing a significant amount of money for the school district. Is that correct?
It depends on what your significant is.
I saw the part. I think what's the average cost now to the district with the mail-in ballots and all the poll workers?
We usually budgeted around 13 and spent between 9 and 13 for the past several years. So right now.
But since we're going to mail-in ballots, it increases a bit, right?
Yeah, it's over 50,000 already.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to bring forward. What I'm trying to get to is if for some reason this budget doesn't pass because of the mail-in ballots and stuff like that, what's the flavor of this board to, go right to austerity? Because I don't think we can afford to do another $50,000 to go to a second vote.
There isn't enough time. There isn't enough time.
No, there isn't.
To have a second vote.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
There hasn't been any guidance from the state on a second vote. So, in theory, there could be litigation that second vote's being denied school districts.
So I think
because it's written in election law that you have to have a second vote, but there hasn't been any guidance laid out yet about the second vote. So we really don't know. There's a lot of unknowns.
Right.
Is there any aid being provided by the state because of these certain circumstances?
Not yet.
Nothing straight from the state, but we are running a portion of our expenditures through a cross contract with BOCES, so we should be getting BOCES aid on some of the expenses. Okay. So we should be getting over 5,000 back next year.
It's something at least.
Yeah.
The way things are going now, I don't expect to see anything from the state. I really don't. If he can't decide whether the schools are going to open up in September, I don't think he can make a decision about anything that's going to happen come September. That's just my opinion.
So, Jane, can you just tell us, because I'm not sure that the public understands sort of, so if the budget doesn't pass, because I think it's important that we articulate to the to the public clearly, why or whether we want them to vote for this budget. So if the budget doesn't pass, what budget do we go to? And then what do we give up in terms of control over the money we have to spend anyway?
So we would have to reduce the budget, or I should say, there's certain things that we have to take out of the budget. So that would be all the equipment purchases I mentioned, certain student supplies, the capital appropriations, so the $126,468 we would have to take out. Management confidential employees would not receive any salary increases. And then, so then after that, we'd have to decide between not allowing community use of the facilities at all, or charging every single group that wanted to use the facilities.
And then are there different controls over the money in terms of shifting it or moving it around or making decisions about what we do with it?
So if the board were to determine that something on this list that's generally like a non-contingent item, if the board deems it contingent item, so let's say it's safety or security. So I'm just kind of thinking that the project for the doors at the Riccardi Elementary, I mean, if you were to deem that a safety issue or security issue, then I think you could say that we should be paying for that. But that's like one of those, you'd have to talk to your attorney.
Right.
And then, so the total of the items that we should be taking out are equal to about $877,000.
So we're still on the hook for a considerable amount regardless. And so if we pass the budget, then we also have a lot more flexibility in terms of how we actually spend the money to serve students. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, we're going to lose a lot of program if we go to an austerity budget, right?
Yeah, it's $877,000 worth.
Right.
Right. I just think it's important for people to sort of understand that. It's just, if you say no to the budget, it's not like it goes away. That there are still obligations that we have. It just ties our hands in terms of how we distribute those resources.
Right. And we're pushing off equipment replacements, another year. So the computers, we definitely are going to need replacements on that. So, so everybody can have what they need.
And just to go back to that, it's also saying we're going back in September. I mean, if we don't go back in September, then there's a surplus, right? In a sense that what we passed could be a lot less than what we're dealing with at the end of the year. Is that a true statement?
No.
So what are you speaking to? Like, are you talking about like the savings?
Yeah, I mean, if we don't go back to school until December, right?
Okay.
What are we looking at instead of a $66 million or $67 million budget? What are we looking at as far as what we had just talked about from a transportation and a BOCES type situation?
Well, if it's a contingent budget, we still have to get rid of all those items, regardless if we're saving money from transportation. You still have to get rid of these particular things because those are written in the law.
Okay.
So of course, yes, we'd be saving on transportation, but then how are we going to buy computers?
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? So yeah, we would probably be saving something, but we can't spend it on these things.
Right.
Gotcha.
I think also have to take into account that we're going to have 2 look-back periods so we can get further cut, whether we have the budget passes or we're on a contingency budget.
Gotcha.
So if the governor decides that there is some surplus, that might be cut out in the denial of state aid to the district.
Yeah.
And while there might be savings in one area in terms of if we went to a mixed model of online learning and, in school and at home, there are other expenses, right, around that in terms of both the technology and the training and really making sure that what we're doing is effective. So it's hard. I mean, of course, it's hard to tell, but we really want to have the most flexibility we can in terms of spending the money that we have to work with.
Right.
Yep.
I think the public should consider that the budget is a good faith estimate right now. It's the best we can gauge what our expenses will be in the circumstances. The last time the budget was defeated in the district, the sitting board decided to go to an austerity budget. They cut out sports, arts and music as extracurricular activities for students. So to your point, Dr. Haas, that there'll be mandated cuts that goes without saying. I think the difference with this budget is there's so many unknowns. Again, due process would be that voters would have a second chance, and as a board president, if the budget gets defeated, I'd like to see the budget go for a second vote. But we don't know. We have no guidance on how that's going to be. The timelines don't seem to work out. So we're probably going to have to take some guidance from our attorneys and from the New York State School Boards Association on how this is all going to work, because it's all uncharted territory. No board and district has had to face this kind of uncertainty in the budget development before.
I would say, though, while at the same time we're dealing with that uncertainty, we're also dealing with far more clarity than we've ever had, at least as board members, in my experience in the last 5 years, in terms of understanding actually the budget and where it goes and who's doing what. So I really appreciate that. And I think that I don't feel like it's like, well, I don't really understand what's going on. And it's like, I feel like this is a budget that, that we can get behind, partly because I trust the people who have developed it and presented it to us.
Okay.
Agree.
Comments from the public there?
Nope, there are no more comments.
Okay, no
10 minutes is up.
Ding.
Nicely done. I will entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Gage, second by Mr. Ferraro. Any discussion? None being heard, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 We need to take a break, Dan, to switch over.
Yeah, we have to log out of this one and then log into the executive session.
Brandon's gotta turn the live feed off and tell him, we'll give him a heads up when we're coming out.